I think I literally heard AOC say this recently, that no one achieves substantial wealth without somehow or another victimizing other people.
But here's the truth. You're not going to get health care to these people by threatening to tax and eat the rich. You raise billionaires' taxes, they just leave the state. Or they leave the country. Or in some cases, the planet.
Joe Rogan is hitting back hard at AOC's claim that the super rich built their wealth by stealing. The podcast giant says politicians like AOC and Sanders are attacking the American dream, that powerful promise that anyone can work their way up to massive wealth. Rogan's response was sharp, bold, and full of fire. So hit that subscribe button because this discussion is absolutely intense.
Businessman, although I kind of am.
You are.
I kind of am in some weird way. I've become a businessman.
Yeah.
But this idea that it's easy to become a billionaire and that these billionaires somehow or another are the problem because they're not paying their fair share is so weird that's a narrative that actually gets pushed through when you look at the actual numbers of the tax base and how much they contribute and how many jobs they provide. And yeah, they make more money than everybody else. Right. You could do that too. It's like, this is one of the things that America is really good at. You can come from nothing and become incredibly wealthy if you figure something out and go. And we just assume that everybody who makes an incredible amount of money stole it.
Joe Rogan pushes back hard on the idea that every extremely wealthy person reached the top through theft or lies. It is a tempting but seriously flawed story, and one that has become a core part of progressive politics, pushed loudly by figures like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, Zohran Mamdani, and Bernie Sanders. This belief does not stop at questioning how the rich made their money. It stretches to the repeated claim that wealthy people dodge taxes while regular Americans pay the full bill. It sounds convincing, but the numbers tell a very different story. The top 1% of earners in America pay nearly 40% of all federal income tax, a fact rarely brought up in progressive talking points, yet one that seriously breaks apart the story they keep selling.
They robbed someone, this is a narrative that gets pushed along democratic socialists, that no one achieves that. I think I literally heard AOC say this recently, that no one achieves substantial wealth without somehow or another victimizing other people.
Yeah. And then Jeff Bezos is the obvious counterexample, which is like every time you do the one click and the thing gets delivered to you 2 hours later at the cheapest possible price, saving you and your family a lot of time and money.
But at the expense of small mom and pop stores, allegedly.
Although a lot of them sell on Amazon, a lot of small businesses sell on Amazon.
The truth is straightforward. America rewards innovation and hard work. When you build something that genuinely improves people's lives, whether it is a product, a service, or an idea, the market recognizes that value and pays you well for it. This is a core principle of free market capitalism, and one that democratic socialists keep misunderstanding or choosing to ignore. Take Jeff Bezos. Progressive critics love to paint him as a villain who crushed small businesses in Amazon's aggressive rise to dominance. But that view conveniently skips a far more important truth. Amazon did not just replace small retailers, it gave them a real opportunity. Through Amazon's marketplace, small business owners gained access to a global customer base they could never have reached on their own, selling across states and even countries with just a laptop and a solid product. That is not exploitation. That is opening commerce up to everyone.
The thing you can do is you can compare and contrast to other countries that have more draconian policies in the direction that those folks are suggesting. And so Europe in particular, many European countries have a much more draconian, are much even more hostile to business, and the result is they are much poorer. Their slower growth are actually shrinking. The people there are much less well off. There's much less funding for social programs, and so you can also do the cross-country comparison.
Joe Rogan's guest makes a point that economic history repeatedly backs up. Countries that pile on heavy regulations and brutal taxes on businesses do not grow. They stall. Around the world, nations that treat entrepreneurs as enemies rather than growth engines end up in a slow and painful economic decline. Look at parts of Europe. When governments take the majority of what a business earns through aggressive taxation, they do not just cut profits, they kill the motivation to build anything. Why spend years of your life, savings, and energy on a business only to hand most of it over to the government? The outcome is predictable. Fewer startups, fewer jobs, and a shrinking middle class kept alive by unsustainable government spending. Money and talent move toward freedom, and the countries that understand this basic truth are the ones that keep thriving. Maher shared similar thoughts with Joe Rogan when he said this.
Paid to the government, if you add in state tax, local sales, property, fees, Obamacare, probably almost 60% of what I earn. That's a lot, and I still wouldn't mind. if Bernie Sanders would stop saying the rich don't pay taxes. And while I'm sure the super rich with their army of accountants and corporate loopholes get away with, us regular rich people pay a ton of taxes. And who stands up and gives us a pat on the back? Nobody, that's who.
Bill Maher adds strong support to Rogan's argument, sharing a personal account that cuts straight through the progressive talking points pushed by Sanders and AOC. As a wealthy American himself, Maher speaks from real experience rather than theory, and what he shares is eye-opening. Nearly 60% of his earnings go to taxes, not a small contribution. Not a carefully planned dodge. More than half of everything he makes goes straight to the government, yet the loudest voices on the left want the public to believe the wealthy are barely paying anything at all. Maher's honest admission gives powerful support to a truth that progressive politicians constantly hide. The rich do not just pay their fair share by nearly every real measure, they pay significantly more than anyone else. When one of Hollywood's most well-known liberals is openly tearing apart your tax argument, it might be time to rethink your message.
Top 10% pay 72% of all federal income taxes, and the bottom half, 3%. The Democratic Socialists talk about socialism like we don't already have a lot. Social Security, unemployment, Medicare, nutritional assistance, Medicaid, Obamacare, disability, housing subsidies. Again, not against it. Just the same question. How can you be soaking the rich and failing the poor so badly?
Maher raises a question that hits at the very core of the progressive tax argument. If the wealthy are not paying enough, then what exactly happened to the massive amounts already collected? It is a fair and honestly devastating question. The rich pay their taxes. The money flows into government accounts in huge amounts. But somewhere between collecting it and using it, something breaks down. Take the Affordable Care Act. Obamacare was sold to the American public as a fix for healthcare inequality, a promise that lower-income Americans would finally get access to quality medical care. Yet for millions, that promise still feels out of reach. The same pattern plays out across nearly every major government program. Money gets spent, bureaucracies grow bigger, and the people these programs were meant to help see little real improvement in their lives. Before demanding more from the wealthy, perhaps the more honest question is, what are you doing with what you already have?
It can't buy happiness, but it sure can buy healthiness. Half the country can buy access to concierge doctors, specialists, new treatments, personal trainers, nutritionists, private chefs, and whatever Gwyneth Paltrow is putting in her And the other half has the place I was just talking about, remote area medical, the pop-up healthcare clinic that rolls into town once a year like a county fair, except instead of riding the tilt-a-whirl, a volunteer doctor pulls your infected tooth. And the saddest thing in the 60 Minutes piece is that nothing has changed since they covered it in 2008.
The state of American healthcare tells a story that no political spin can hide. For many citizens, basic medical care has become so expensive that they are literally waiting for a traveling charity clinic to come to their town once a year. That is not a healthcare system. That is failure wrapped in bureaucratic language. Then there is California, the progressive movement's proudest example and its biggest disappointment. The state collects taxes at a rate that would shock most countries. It promises change, fairness, and world-class public services, yet its most ambitious projects sit frozen, burning through money without delivering results. Homelessness is out of control, middle-class families are leaving, costs keep climbing. If California represents the best version of progressive governance in action, it raises a question worth thinking about. What exactly are all those taxes actually building?
The truth, you're not going to get health care to these people by threatening to tax and eat the rich. You raise billionaires' taxes, they just leave the state. Or they leave the country. Or in some cases, the planet.
Maher delivers what may be the strongest blow of the entire conversation. The progressive dream of heavily taxing billionaires does not just fail in principle, it fails in practice, and the proof is already unfolding right now. New York and California serve as clear warnings. As tax burdens grew, wealthy residents did not simply accept the bill. They left. They took their money, their investments, and the jobs they create with them, moving to Florida, Texas, and beyond. The tax base these states were counting on quietly walked out the door. This is exactly why voices like Maher's matter. He is not a conservative, he is a liberal sounding an alarm about the very real economic damage caused by policies pushed by AOC and Mamdani. When the wealthy leave, it is not just the government that loses money. Working people lose opportunities, businesses, and their livelihoods. Ideology that ignores real consequences is not compassion. It is recklessness.
Kid Elon, but he had a good idea recently that might be apropos here. During the recent government shutdown, he volunteered to pay all the TSA workers himself, with couch money. That's how super rich our super rich are. They can single-handedly fund entire government programs. Okay, so let's make that a thing. The Adopt a Cause challenge for billionaires.
Maher drives the point home with a trademark humor. But underneath the jokes lies an uncomfortable truth that democratic socialists seem remarkably unwilling to face. Taxing the wealthy out of the country does not just shrink government revenue. It wipes out something far harder to replace: the voluntary contributions the rich make completely outside of Washington's reach. Billionaires and high-net-worth individuals fund hospitals, universities, research programs, and charities at a scale no government policy can easily match. When they leave, that generosity disappears with them. And ordinary Americans are watching. They see the broken promises, they see the rising costs, the stalled projects, the fleeing businesses. They see the gap between what progressive politicians promise and what they actually deliver. This is exactly why Democrats face a genuinely serious challenge heading into 2028. When voters start connecting these dots, and more they are, the political consequences could be both fast and severe.
Just skip the middleman, the government and the healthcare bureaucracies that for whatever reason, no matter how much they take in, never seem to get enough to the people, and just shame the billionaires into doing it directly because they have all the money, and noblesse oblige isn't just the name of a cologne.
What this conversation between Joe Rogan, Bill Maher, and their guests ultimately shows is a fundamental clash between progressive ideology and economic reality. The left story that the wealthy are villains who steal, dodge taxes, and hoard resources at society's expense simply does not hold up against the facts. The rich pay a disproportionately higher share of taxes. Entrepreneurs like Bezos expanded opportunity rather than crushing it. Countries and states that punish success with brutal taxes do not create utopias, they trigger mass departure. And the billions already collected by governments like California's have produced broken promises and unfinished goals. America was built on a simple but powerful idea. Innovate, work hard, create value, and you will be rewarded. Democratic socialists want to tear down that idea in the name of fairness without ever honestly answering where the money already goes. If 2028 arrives, and voters remember this conversation, the progressive movement may find that the most costly thing they ever did was refuse to deal in truth.